Hey, friends, and welcome to the fourth episode of Let's Talk About It. Today, I sat down with my friend and fellow naturopathic doctor, Dr. Emily Fitzgerald. She's an ND in Toronto, Ontario, and we talked all things healing protocols, Cellcore, which is one of my new favorite supplement companies. We also discussed naturopathic treatment plans, what it takes to create a naturopathic treatment plan, how your treatment plans are actually formulated, as well as lifestyle measures that are hugely underestimated that not a lot of us actually pay a lot of attention to that can actually make a huge difference in our healing outcomes. So without further ado, let's get into this podcast episode. And before I end this intro, I'd like to remind you to please like this podcast, subscribe, and please share it with your friends and anybody who would find the information in this podcast episode relevant and helpful for them. Thank you, and let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It. And today I am sitting down with my friend, Dr. Emily Fitzgerald. Emily is a naturopathic doctor in Toronto and Ajax, Ontario. So I'm very excited to have this conversation with you because we talk a lot.
We do.
And our conversations tend to go on like before we know it. Like the other day, as an example, when you called me, it was like almost 50 minutes. And I was like, well, I got to get out of the tub now because I've been sitting in the tub the whole time. It's like pruny afterwards. We kind of get carried away with our conversation. So I felt like it would be a good opportunity for us to maybe record one of our conversations and share it on the podcast.
Totally. Yeah, you should have let me know that before.
I didn't even realize. I had no idea how much time went by.
Yeah, it definitely snowballs into what about this? What about this?
Yeah.
I love that. I love how it takes many different turns.
Yeah, I agree with you. So just some background information, because I'm sure people are probably wondering, well, what do they talk about? So Emily and I are both naturopathic doctors. You are still an actively practicing ND in Toronto and Ajax. And you actually graduated a few years before me. What year did you graduate in?
2010.
2010. Okay. And then I graduated in 2013. We never knew each other at the naturopathic college.
No.
And then I can't even recall what year it was, but I remember at the time I was looking for people who were doing microneedling with the e-derma stamp. And so I was kind of searching out other NDs who were using this microneedling device, and I came across you. And then that's kind of like where it started, that we went out for like a drink one night when I was in Toronto, and kind of just that's how we met each other. And then ever since then, we've kind of just like touched base here and there over the years. But yeah, it's kind of a random friendship in the sense that we've actually only met each other in person twice, which is hilarious, don't you think?
It is hilarious. Yeah. But I love that though. It's just like we've been able to just chat so much and formulate like good conversation, not formulate, but just have great conversations and shoot, about what's going on in the profession and then like, and how we treat. And, at the time it was, and still is so helpful. I love being able to have you there to bounce off what I'm thinking.
Yes. And that's what's so fun about it too, that, having the like talking about like, well, what about this? Like, would you consider doing this test for this client? And what about this treatment protocol? And have you tried this brand before? And so it's kind of fun that way, just to kind of like keep up with, learning about what's going on in the profession. And you have some great mentors as well with some of the people that you work with, which is really exciting too.
Yeah, it's been like my probably number one mission, like ever since I got out of school, to find great leadership and mentorship. And it's been like an ebb and flow, right? But I currently am just so grateful for the team that I work with. It's just, helped me evolve as a practitioner so much more. And it's constant. But I love that, where I can just dive deep and learn new things and get new perspectives on like a condition that I, previously was only looking here. Right. So that's that's the best part of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I like too about your approach is, and this is what's helped me open up and be more mindful, like even formulating products. Like there's a reason why I'm reformulating some of the products. And a lot of it has to do with like some of the conversations that we've had about like environmental exposures, protecting ourselves from environmental exposures, what have you. Yeah, I just find it really fascinating how your practice approach, from my perspective, from our conversation, seems to really integrate lifestyle awareness, and as opposed to just like take this supplement to feel better.
Yeah. I mean,
Thing.
I do think it's so multifaceted, and I try not to overwhelm people with the amounts of things that I think are really important. And we drip it in depending on the, the cadence and the person. But yeah, I really think that those key day-to-day things make such a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be like your water is not clean,
Yeah.
and we need to change that, which is that's a big ask for people. Like you need to get a filter that's more than a Brita, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But I just think like these things really matter long term. So I love to dive into that stuff. And I'm pretty resourceful. For some reason I just can like pull this cool company or whatever and I'll set it up.
Yes, you are the resourcefulness queen. I find like you're always sending me new websites and like products that I've never heard of before, and I'm like, well, how did you find that?
I don't know sometimes even how I stumble upon things, but I like that I can just
Yeah.
stumble on it and somehow it's stored in some place in my brain and I'm like, oh, that was cool. I
Yeah.
think like, I mean, you and I both have a similar aesthetic. Like we really love that part of it too,
Mm-hmm.
so
100%. It's like something must be effective and like worthy, like it's
yeah.
actually going to do something,
Yeah.
but also like be aesthetically pleasing and like be mindful of, that it's an art and a science, right? And I believe, and you believe this too, that like the creativity and like the graphic design, the artwork, like the colors that were chosen, all that type of stuff must reflect like that as well,
Yeah.
right? The art and science of wellness. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I want things that are going to be therapeutically valuable, but also like something that you want to get and have and display on your countertop.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's important. Well, it's important to me. Maybe it's not important to everybody, but so I gravitate towards that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun too. But yeah, I think like lifestyle, environmental health, like that really like these are like the underlying things that really matter. So sometimes these things like I love finding companies that like are clean and I'm not worried about like that impact with. So maybe I won't smell like earth.
So your definition, just so that we're all clear here, like, are you completely fragrance free, like that you prefer that, or do you prefer to use like naturally derived scents?
I for a long while have been 100% fragrance free. Like shampoo, bath, like anything that I use, like necessaire in the bath or in the shower, uh, to laundry soap, to dish detergent, to everything, even down to not using essential oils.
Mm.
But I've been relaxing a little bit on that lately. However, I mean, any scent is still going to have an impact on hormone cascade,
Mm.
whether it's natural or not. It's better, obviously, to use the non-synthetic forms of things, but I'm pretty stickler about fragrance, like synthetic fragrance.
Okay, gotcha. That's actually something that I have some confusion around too, about like in candles, because we've had a conversation about candles in the past of like the fragrances in candles, and so there's this whole world of like use synthetic fragrance oils instead of the essential oil because they burn more cleanly and they're healthier for the environment. What are your thoughts on like fragrance free candles versus like the synthetic versus essential oil?
I actually don't have a lot of knowledge on what happens chemically in the air. I just stick to fragrance free, and then the wick needs to be lead free.
Right. Okay. Because it was the wick thing that you were mentioning too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I'm like, that's just like in the environment all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that has to. I have a pet too, so I'm often thinking, what are they taking in from that? As well.
Right.
I love like the warmth of a candle, so I'm like, give me the fragrance free or the beeswax, like something
Yes.
like that. You had posted something about that the other day, the beeswax. Something about
Yeah, I was just curious about it. I don't know a lot about the ethics behind using beeswax. I don't know. It was like a whole other level of, like I didn't realize that actually was detrimental to the bees.
also, I didn't know that either. So
Well, and see, this is the thing. Is it though? Like, I don't know. I'd actually be interested in talking to a beekeeper about this, like somebody who actually like firsthand has exposure to the health of bees to know if that is actually of detriment or not. I don't know.
no idea. And that's really too.
It's just like there's so many, I find like, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, that there's so much out there in terms of like this is good or this is bad or like you should not do this because it's harmful to the environment, or like there's so many different layers that it's almost overwhelming sometimes to try to keep up with all of the information and try to be like as like clean as possible with what you're doing. And it's so much, like even for me, that I find, and you probably can relate to this too, that I have a difficult time having clients do certain things like in terms of lifestyle factors or lifestyle changes, because it's just like how much is too much and how much is overwhelming and therefore not helpful to someone actually healing.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that, because if the stress and the overwhelm and, that side of things is going to outweigh the positive impact of changing that one thing, like totally. So
Yeah.
it's about starting small. And the way that I do it is not going to be the same way that everyone desires to do it.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. Um, that's why I even said like I relax a bit on the essential oil thing. Cause I'm like, sometimes I like having a little bit of scent in the house, right?
Yeah. Right. It's just
Yeah.
nice to have
There's a
that.
joy in that too. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't want to take that kind of stuff away entirely to like
Right.
strip it down to whatever, the nothingness of that.
Yeah.
But I think the stuff that like, you're using like daily and you're bringing it in daily, like that's a big one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would pay attention to that stuff, but it may not be the first thing I bring up in a visit. It's probably going to be like down the road after
Mm-hmm.
we've really, helped with the thing that's in the immediate, the most important thing to deal with.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So when someone, let's just say, comes in to see you, what are normally like the first things that you start focusing on of the most importance for people?
yeah, really that's so directed by what the chief concern is when someone comes in. I really try to take down the experience of that, whatever that chief concern is, immediately. We might not get to the core root of something immediately, but we're going to try to deal with bringing down the symptom response.
Mm.
Right. Because, ultimately we want people to feel better
Yeah.
right away. And then deal with some of the more core underlying things. I really like, I think you align with me on this, but I like testing when it's valuable and it's going to yield us something that will help move the needle.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, if we can do that out of the gate and it's going to provide us like valuable information that will help inform how we're going to treat, I will do that right out of the gate. I think people appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right. And then combining like clinical, what's come up in clinical conversation, plus the testing, plus like, you know, a whole bunch of other things. We put that all together and we don't just rely on one thing.
Right.
I like that integration of knowledge and putting that together and helping someone that way.
Yeah. That's usually like how I tend to start things as well. I mean, obviously, I think testing is becoming a little bit more understood for someone coming in to see a naturopathic doctor, functional medicine practitioner, what have you. That it's becoming more acknowledged that, you know, off the hop, it's likely that ND is going to have you do some testing. I mean, obviously it's still met with some resistance because testing can become expensive. But I do find too, like there's such a need for results yesterday, you know, where everything needs to be done so quickly that it is definitely a fine line to like take all the information of like learning how to like fix that root cause of the issue, figure out what it is to begin with, while also like giving you some symptom reducer type band-aid approaches like from the get-go so someone can start feeling better.
Yeah. And I think just being really upfront about like your thought process there is the key, where you're like, hey, this is going to provide us this immediate sense of relief, but it's not going to be like that underlying sustaining, you know, long-term help. So we still want to dive deep into, and you know what, not everybody wants to dive as deep as sometimes I want to go.
Yeah.
So like, you know, kind of getting a sense of that too. But in another thing that I have learned from my team that I'm working with up in Ajax is that sometimes the actual root cause, quote unquote, is actually no longer there, but the body is still responding like it's there. And so sometimes it is about just taking down, you know, that the body response, whether that's inflammation or looking at immune stability or like those types of things, right? Because the actual root thing that originally was the cause is no longer present.
Right. That's fascinating.
I think that's really interesting, right? Because we do often rack our brains and like really drive home the root cause of things, but sometimes that is an impossible feat if that is no longer even present.
Yeah. And sometimes the root cause is never just one thing anyways. Like sometimes there's a few different pieces.
Yeah. I would say like 90% of the time, there are many things that are contributing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been a valuable thing for me, just to keep that in mind, because it can be a long layered process if we're looking for something that no longer is even
actually there anymore.
Yeah. And I think most of those things would fall into the category of something that's impacting sympathetic nervous system, the stress response, right? Like that stressor is no longer present, but the body still has memory that it's present. It's still reacting in that same way. So that's been a really valuable piece that I've taken away over the last year. And I'm grateful for that, to know that. And it definitely impacts the way I perceive and treat.
Right. Yeah. Being a little bit more mindful of like where to start with the whole. Yeah.
And like just really having a lot of conversations with people about what I'm thinking. And like, so every time I do an initial with someone, I get back on a phone call with them just to like review my thought process, to be like, hey, here's the plan I've created. Let's just review it, make sure we're on the same page, right? Like I like doing that because it's helpful for people. I want them to be just as involved in the process of like what's going on as I am. So
yeah, because you're a big are Wednesdays your research day? Is that your day that you
like the only day that's not like a specific research day is Tuesday, but like, yeah, I feel like I do a lot of digging. And in every case, it's like literally I dig per person.
Yeah, you do. Know? Yeah. And that's something that I admire about the approach, because every single naturopathic doctor's approach is
so different.
individualized. It's individualized to the ND, right? And so it's like how I practice is similar to you, but it's not the same. Or how I practice. So I guess I don't know like the verbiage I should be using anymore these days, but yeah, it's like we all have different approaches of like how we do things. And you definitely take a very like it's like you're literally taking pieces of a puzzle and like sitting down and putting them all together. And it's amazing. Like, it's great to like see the like, okay, well, this happened and this, and you know, they live in this type of house. And I mean, maybe there's some type of like exposure from this perspective. It's really cool to see how your mind, you take in like absolutely everything in someone's like history and symptom picture.
Yeah,
It's incredible. Yeah.
Which can be like an overwhelming start too.
It can be, but it's great. It's great for people who are chronically ill that really need that like whole overhaul thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think like, I wish I could have people understand like the complexity of what goes on and I'm sure that I'm not alone in this. I'm sure every ND like does this, and how we choose that little, you know, pill bottle, the supplement bottle that you get, like it's really like thoughtfully chosen. It's not just another supplement from the shelf.
Yeah.
And like sometimes I get like frustrated with what that experience is like, because it really is chosen in a way that I'm like, okay, like that herb plus this, like that's really thoughtfully put together. Does that ever like bother you when it's just like, here's this bottle, take it away?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's why, like, even when I transitioned into doing, like, wanting to do some more online related stuff and creating like more automated, if you will, programs that, like the skincare lab, for example, that it's like I was constantly changing the information that was in there because I can't get on board with the idea of cookie cutter plans. Even cookie cutter in the sense of like supplements, right? Like just because one supplement worked for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for the next. And you know, maybe it's because like one extra ingredient that's in that formula that just doesn't work with that one person. Like it's just an example. The one that I'm thinking of the top of my head is like, what form of inositol are you going to use? And then like, what is it in combination with? Like maybe someone's really sensitive to magnesium and therefore should have a magnesium free inositol formula. It's all so individualized right down to the brand and the specific products chosen.
Yeah. And then, you know, what kind of fillers are in a product? Is there a therapeutic dose? How long does someone stay on someone? Is this an indefinite thing? Like so many questions.
Yeah.
Which is like that commitment from the client is so important. Like it's more than a one and done. Like we've got to like evolve this. Right?
Yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of something that I had. There was a consultant that I was working with who was helping me get natural product numbers through Health Canada in order to get products that I've formulated myself onto the market. And I'll never forget this one conversation that we had earlier this year where he was like, Jillian, what you're trying to create right now is an active product that actually works. He's like, that comes with an expense. That's expensive to do. And he's like, honestly, like 80% of the things that are out on the market there right now don't really do anything at all. So because it's like cheaper.
Yeah.
Because you're keeping the dose down, like significantly down, and you're creating a mass marketed or mass produced product that you can get in the hands of more people because you can put it into a more appropriate price point that say like will easily be sold on Amazon. Yeah. And that was like, it was such an eye opener to me to be like, wow, like I had no idea. Here I am like trying to create all these formulas. My formulas are ended up like, they have no choice but to be expensive because of the ingredients that I'm choosing. and like what I'm trying to do with the product. Yeah, that was very surprising to me to hear.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, therapeutic dose is a huge
Yeah.
consideration.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of the times why people don't respond and say, well, that didn't work. Well, it wasn't the therapeutic dose. And like, you need to work with someone to figure out like what that is. But yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Well, I say put out the exact thing you want to do.
Yeah. I also find too, it's like, even if you're like the therapeutic dose that you're looking for, like whatever that is, that specific ingredient might be not the right dose if you're taking, let's say, another supplement, or if you're on a medication or anything like that. So like there's all these factors to keep in mind that no one really pays attention to when it like they're just mass marketing like some fancy new product.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all of those considerations, like especially medications, especially like if you're gonna sort of stack supplements on top of each other, like totally.
Yeah.
Oh,
And it's like it's one of those things too that, I have a lot of people, um or I have had this experience with a lot of people where, and you probably have too, where like they start adding things into the treatment plan that we didn't talk about, where
hmm,
like they'll start taking like a B complex when I'm trying to heal their skin. And it's just like, don't take any of that. Don't take anything that I didn't tell you not like to take,
yeah,
because those things can aggravate acne, right? Things that common everyday things like a B complex, like a lot of people take B complexes, but they don't realize that, here I am creating this perfect, like formulated treatment plan for you that I want you to follow in order to help heal your skin. But I can't help you if you keep taking all these extra supplements that I don't know about, right? Because then it's like, I'm
yeah,
still like wondering what's going on.
yeah. I think,
Yeah.
I mean, I also feel like the space of like health and wellness is really like noisy and chaotic in the sense that like every day, if you're on social media in some way, you're going to see something about someone taking this and giving their review.
Hmm.
And so, of course, you're like, I better add that in, like, or I want
Yeah.
to try that, right? Um, so I also see like just, I don't know, like the desire to like get more things and like add it in.
Yeah.
But I totally hear you. And I think like that's also the same as like if someone has got several practitioners, maybe in like some sort of similar, not exactly the same, profession, not all, maybe not all NDs, but like then we've got a lot of different kind of voices happening to manage something. So
Right.
that can be challenging too because different people hold different knowledge and like it's confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ended up adding a lot of things. So it is good to have some like a main person helping you manage and like kind of bouncing off. What do you think about adding this in?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
because like kind of back to like everything is so thoughtfully put together in the beginning for a reason.
Yeah.
So it's good to kind of stick to that.
Well, I think it's
Yeah.
difficult too, because it's like, again, like not every ND is the same, like just like any healthcare, but like not all medical doctors are the same. Like they all do have different nuances of how they approach different things and what have you. And I think that that's what can be confusing. And sometimes I'm even going to say a little disappointing for people when they go in to see an ND, or whatever healthcare practitioner, expecting that it's going to be exactly how Emily practices, for an example, right? Yeah, and I think that can set someone up for a lot of confusion and perhaps a lot of perhaps failure, even when they're looking for something but they're not
Yeah.
getting it.
Well, the expectations are set there.
Hmm.
Definitely. Um, I was thinking there about with Cellcore,
Yeah.
um, that awesome company that I really love.
Yes.
What what they say is treat the toxicity, not the deficiency.
Mm.
And I think that is true a lot of the times. that if we just keep treating the deficiencies, we're kind of masking the true thing. Now, like I'm getting into like root cause, even though I just said sometimes the root cause is gone. But like in the case that it's still present, that it is something that is, toxicity from environment, etc. Like I think that's a really valuable thing to think about. And when you just add those things in willy nilly, we might just be covering up something, that's a bigger issue.
Yep.
So that was one of like the main pieces that really like got me into that, because I was like, that just hit home so true for me, where I'm like, why are we just giving everyone like, B's and blah, 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 and vitamin C, and like, wait, there's got to be more, like we're not clearing out here,
Yeah.
So
And I find like, yeah, we're definitely going to talk about Cellcore, because Emily is the person who introduced me to Cellcore. I didn't really know anything about it beforehand until that one day that you called me. I remember I was driving from Moncton to Halifax, and you called me and you were like, you heard of this company before, the Cellcore, and you're going on about like all the phases that you can go through with it. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of it before. And what I like about it, and I want you to speak more to it, because I don't know a lot other than just like the surface level of it, and also taking it myself.
Yeah.
Which I'm now on month 3. And the only reason I would have done the full foundational protocol was because of talking to you about Cellcore related stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I found like, again, I want you to explain more of this, because your knowledge on this is way more extensive than mine, that it's more like a cellular.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word detox, but it's like a cellular reset, if you will, like kind of looking at things just a little bit deeper than what I think a lot of like conventional detoxification or antimicrobial protocols actually go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how I originally fell upon it was when I started doing a lot of research into environment and mold and mycotoxins. Like that's like my intro into that. And it didn't start there, but it was like, whoa, this is a huge issue for people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many people do I know, in the city that live in a basement, that have lived through a flood, that like have these really non-specific, non-responsive conditions that I'm like, hey, the normal things that we're doing here are not making an impact. Like something else is up. So that like led me down that road, and then eventually, like the more I dug into that, the more I was like, I found this, and I was like, yeah, like this is awesome. So it was actually the mycotoxin mold piece that had like originally like got me alerted to them, because they have some very specific, interesting binders, which I had not done a lot of work with binders, because I didn't like that they bound out everything. Like I didn't like they pulled minerals out of the body. So I just steered clear of them for a long time. But with Cellcore, their products they specifically do not pull things out like minerals. They're pulling out, the bacterial byproducts, parasitic byproducts, all those kind of mold, mycotoxins. So that's how I started getting into it. And like, it made their how they had put it together made so much sense to me, which was the first phase is to just make sure you're opening the drainage pathways for people, right? Make sure their bowels, their lymph, their liver, like their skin, like that's open, because we don't want to start like breaking stuff down when we're not able to eliminate it, which isn't a new idea. Like it was like this reminder, and the way that they had put it together made so much sense. And then, I started using it and having so much success with like cases that didn't move for a long time. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Right. Like chronic constipation that was like all of a sudden like in days, like
all of a sudden not an issue
and
anymore.
I was like, whoa. Yeah. So like that definitely made me pay attention, because I was like, yeah. And so then I just really started diving into that. And what I've gotten a lot from working with their products is like the healing that comes from using them is really not linear for people. Like people don't necessarily get on it and then all of a sudden they're better. Like it ends up pulling a lot out of body, especially you'll know like into like phase 2 and 3, like it's really like the particular binders and things that are in there are quite strong.
Yeah.
So like that's been like an interesting learning curve for me, but I know it's helping people. I know it's getting them, like it's taking stuff out of the body that I don't want to be there anyway. So yeah, that's like really high level, but I have been so fascinated by it and so grateful to have found that tool because it's helped a lot of people get better. And well, the whole parasitic piece of it is really huge.
Yeah, and crazy.
In practice, up until this point in time, I had never seen the elimination of that for people. Like I've done anti-parasitic protocols, but like no one's calling me saying, I just passed a huge parasite.
Yeah.
Which was super freaky, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's never happened before until using Cellcore. And it's amazing like how people feel like way better after they pass that. Like it'll be like, whoa, I feel my bloating has gone down, or I can now tolerate a food I was not able to tolerate for like the longest time.
Yeah.
Right. And like kind of on that same conversation, I think we focus a lot on like foods that I need to take all these foods out. I can't tolerate them. Like what's going on. Right. But I will say to people, it's not necessarily the food itself. It could be, like we know quality issue with food, some foods, but I often think it's the interaction of the environment with the tolerability for that food.
Yeah.
That is what's changed. So if we can help the environment change, then your tolerance for these things changes.
Yeah, that was something that the other day we were talking about, of how I was mentioning to you. I share with Emily how the progress is going Cellcore thing. And I noticed that's one big thing for me that again, as someone who has done a lot of like anti-parasitic protocols and has really like spent thousands of dollars on testing, like just to, for my own learning experience so that I can more effectively help others. It, like in terms of understanding these tests and what have you, but like having a lot of like gut issues and just trying to get to the bottom of those things. Pasta has always been a killer for me. Like never have been really like tolerant of it. It always makes me feel quite ill. Not that I'm promoting like let's all go eat all the pasta in the world. But I will say that in month 3 now of the Cellcore, I can eat pasta, and I don't just eat like, the typical pasta on the shelf. I am getting like organic semolina pasta imported from Italy. So yeah. I'm sure that the protein is different in this pasta, but I can tolerate it now. And that never would have been a thing, like even like 2 years ago, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's crazy.
It's super crazy. Like, and I have learned through doing a lot of learning through them that is something that occurs, right? Which is like eventually your tolerance, your immune tolerance for foods changes.
Yeah.
Just super cool, right? Because it just opens up like life for people in a different way.
Yeah.
And I like it because it's not reducing all the time. It's expansive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think dairy is another one that will really see change, tolerance to dairy.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
And it just makes it put into perspective the whole like old school. I'm going to call it old school because I feel like it's like, in the days when I first might have graduated from the naturopathic college, in this way of thinking that you do food sensitivity testing and then you eliminate what you're sensitive to. It's like, well, why are you sensitive to those things in the first place, right? Like, why wasn't that ever the thing that was explored?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually always my conversation around food sensitivity testing. I very rarely go to it. Mm-hmm. I find it hard to reproduce. I find a lot of the times it's disappointing for people because we don't actually get many things coming back, or like everything comes back.
Or everything comes back, yeah. And then they're like, what am I supposed to eat?
I'm like, that's not the foods. That's like the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to steer away from it for that reason. And really start working more. And again, this is like old school, is on the terrain,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. That
Um,
terrain thing that it's like
yeah,
you hear about, and you see some practitioners like really focus on it, and then other practitioners being like, oh, whatever. I feel
I
like
think,
there's like a this.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Um, I also with Cellcore love their focus on like mitochondrial health.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is that cellular piece, um, and like how much it helps hormonal health.
Mm. Yeah.
Like I don't know, but like how often do you hear about like the mitochondria helping hormones? It's it's usually not talked about until we're like in like maybe I don't know, like late 30s, 40s, like
Yeah.
infertility talked
Yeah.
about.
Infertility, fertile related issues, because then it's like you get into the gene expressions,
Yeah.
right? And
I
that's
think
where
like
we start
mitochondria,
thinking that.
yeah, like way before.
Yeah.
I think we need to think about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I remember once a practitioner kind of laughed that I wanted at age 29 for someone I wanted to help their mitochondria, and they were like, "That's not an issue." I'm like, "No, I really do think it's an issue." And the more that I've learned with Cellcore, I'm like, "Yeah, it is." Um, and that's a huge part of the energy cascade.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that gets talked enough. We talk a lot about adrenals, and I totally agree with that. But and you know, B12 and iron, but not mitochondria with energy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I remember, I don't know if you've ever tried these before, but I did in the beginning experiment with some of those mitochondrial support formulas.
Hmm.
Um, and they're awful. I have to say, like, there's something about them that I just couldn't tolerate. Like, it was just, so then I just stopped even suggesting like mitochondrial support formulas for clients. But I think that had a lot to do with at the time, because I will say, like, even from 2013, 2014, when I started practicing until like today, the world of functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, has changed so drastically, in terms of like the knowledge and understanding of certain things, and why you would use certain supplements, and even the formulations of these supplements have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that mitochondrial support formula in 2014, when I was like testing it out, is very unlikely that it even exists today. I haven't even looked, but I bet you that formula has been changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that would probably have like carnitine, CoQ10, like those
Yeah.
normal things you would see. Cellcore stuff doesn't have any of that in it. It's mostly the fulvic and humic
Yes.
acids, um, which work on a different plane. Like you could almost pair that with the CoQ10, like those formulas, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Have you noticed a change in your energy or mental clarity?
I definitely mental clarity. Um, yeah, I've noticed with that, like the sharpness of things.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, what else have I noticed? I'm trying to like peg it.
The,
I've been getting a lot of like low grade headaches, though. That is the
mm,
one thing, and it always happens like at the change of the phase. Like
that's what I
phase
say.
one,
Like
phase
it's
two.
not linear, right? Like it's
Yeah,
like it's definitely like doing interesting things.
yeah, it really is. It's kind of cool how it's such a comprehensive approach too, where it's not just like let's heal your gut. It's like let's do that, and like let's focus on this, and let's help support your immune system, and balance out mitochondria. Like all, it's not
Yeah,
just one compartmentalized thing.
yeah. They do like a lot of like trace mineral focus,
Hmm.
and they're very focused on like quality. Like you won't, so products will go out of stock often because they can't produce them in the way of the quality that they want, which is also something I really look for. There's a couple other companies that I know of that just won't produce their products if we don't have the best quality there. But I love that about them too.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just such a fan. I don't know.
So
if I can get people, and I will also say, like I was saying with this linear thing, is that not everybody moves through the phases at like lightning speed.
mhm,
Like some people need to repeat phase 2 several times if they're still in an elimination from a gastrointestinal perspective of
right,
parasites. Like if you still see them eliminating, we're not moving on.
right.
But I find people are like, okay, I'm ready for phase 3. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I need you to stay here for a while because like we're not ready.
Yeah, I understand
Sorry.
that. It's like pushing through. Yeah, let's get to the end.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That makes sense to me. How can you explain? I know you've mentioned that they something about the emotional healing support.
Yeah, they came up. This is new. They have actually, it's not even that is not out yet. But they had been testing this mental emotional support. We'll call it adrenal formula for some clients who were having sort of trouble getting good elimination on the protocol. And as soon as they added that in, it was like all of a sudden this release, this whole idea of like letting go,
So
and
cool.
you and I talk a lot about like that emotional body being so important, not just this focus on my physical body and like renewing my nutrients. Like there's a whole other aspect of, health and wellness that like is so important to the physical stuff working well.
I agree with you. I find that it's one thing to say it, but then it's another thing to understand how to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
find
how
that's where
much
it gets
change
stuck.
that way. I
Yeah.
just have like I have my referral network that I'm like, go see this person, right?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's huge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
have them corroborate that is like, yeah, that makes so much sense. Why some people are a little less responsive on the protocol
Hmm.
because they're just holding for whatever reason, for whatever's going on in their lives. So the clinic that I work in the city is predominantly psychotherapists, which is interesting as well.
Wow.
We get
Yeah.
like that network to be like, hey, let's go here, let's work here
Yeah.
for a bit before we kind of come back to the physical side.
Yeah. And I love that. I don't know if you've had clients experience this before. I was doing colonics a fair bit when I was still living in Halifax, and mainly like they were introduced to me from a colon hydrotherapist that I had been working with at the time, and then she just at first I was like super resistant to them. I was like, no, we're not doing that ever. Like, don't even talk to me about it because like we're not ever doing that. But she enticed me one day to do it because I do have so many chronic gut issues, and she was like, just try it. Like you have nothing to lose except my dignity. Oh, I'm just kidding. It's a weird experience. It's a very weird experience. I won't deny that. But man, it's the emotional relationship and the emotional experience that happens when you're having a colonic is very interesting. And it is that release related spectrum, right? Of like, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're crying. You're like, what's wrong with me? Like, here I am having a colonic, like bawling. It's a
Yeah,
funny
totally.
experience.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
we do that. We have colon hydrotherapy in Ajax, and yeah, I find the response of getting people to do that is really positive. Even
Hmm.
though there's like this like, how are we getting over the hump of like the thought of it, right?
The thought of
But
it. Yeah.
yeah, totally. The other thing that I find really really helpful for that side of things is actually, and I don't practice this, but we have practitioners in the clinic that do it, is amino acid IVs. It's really
Mm-hmm.
helpful
Yeah.
for helping with stress, anxiety. Like it's amazing.
Hmm.
So I love like, you having all these tools and being like, hey, let's like add like a pepper in some of this and like coming back together. And then it's also touch points for everyone to like chat. about how they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's we forget that there's a lot of value in like the listening as a therapist and like just allowing people the space to like speak about what's going on.
Yeah. That's what I like about the idea of a true integrative clinic, where like you're going to that clinic and you're seeing like the psychotherapist, you're seeing the naturopathic doctor, you're going for your IVs, like you're doing your colonics, you're doing it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're being supported in as much of a capacity as what we in 2021 understand with health and healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally. And when that model works and like it works so well,
Mm-hmm.
like when there's a real good synergy with the team, like I think like ultimately we were speaking at the beginning of like that mentorship, and like that is one of the things I really appreciate about that synergy of that team that I'm with, because we're all like working towards the same thing, we're all on the same page, and it's like awesome.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
only
I
for
agree.
clients but also for my personal experience, like you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it's a win-win for everyone. I do think though that as Canadians, I think that the idea of health um, is a little fragmented,
mhm.
simply because of how we pay for our healthcare. And I always found that to be an issue, not all the time, but and I did find towards the end of like having a clinical practice that this was becoming less so of an issue. Maybe you can relate to that too. Just seeing like this shift a little bit more, where people only come in as much as their health benefits will allow for them to come in to see you.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of sad from that perspective, because it's like there's so much more that we can do. It's just that unfortunately like health does become expensive and can become expensive, so it's like how do you
Yeah.
bridge this fine line of like not treating someone's pocketbook while being mindful, that you're not like, for lack of a better word, gouging them with insane prices and fees on things that actually aren't helping someone, versus like this whole comprehensive approach that some of these high-end clinics, some of these high-end private clinics that you can go to are offering.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is challenging for sure. Um, and I can only sit in my integrity of what I know is going to be helpful for someone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you and I are like people that research like crazy. So as long as I know that it's going to have, I know it's going to have a positive impact, and I'll always present and be really upfront. Like, this is what we're dealing with here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it totally can be challenging.
Yeah.
It's hard
Yeah.
sometimes, but I always think that there's something we can do no matter what.
Yes.
Just might not be that like full, like that's what I mean by not everybody wants to like dive into like that deep stuff, but I still think that there's definitely things that can be offered,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah,
even like you're saying, that conversation, the things
I
that I
agree.
thought that would be impactful for someone. Like I spoke to someone this week that was like, yeah, remember like 3 years ago, like you said this, and I always think about that, and I that's amazing to me that like I would never even like have thought that that made an impact, but like
Mm-hmm.
it sticks with them, and it's a good thing for me to reflect on too, like, oh, that made a difference, you know.
Yes, those the little things, I think too. And again, I think there's probably some naturopathic doctors who are also listening to this conversation. I
Yeah.
mean, I hope that there are, and um, I think for those people, just knowing that like you are helping people, because I think a lot of us,
Mhm.
we it's like we want to move the sun and the stars for clients, right? Like we want to like fix everything for them and just make them feel like so much better. And I think because I think having this conversation with a lot of other NDs, that a lot of us do feel this way, that we only want the best for our clients and for our patients, and sometimes it's, yeah, you put so much pressure on yourself to make that happen. Um, yeah, it can be very stressful at times. Like just knowing and understanding that you doing your best is the best that you can do for someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. It is I feel it as an immense amount of pressure and
Mhm.
responsibility.
Yeah.
That's like the best way that I can put it.
Yeah.
Mhm. And so learning not to necessarily carry that all is
Oh,
really,
yeah.
it's
That,
hard.
yeah.
But that is our self-care, right? It's like, that's part of what we're learning is to not, it's hard.
Mhm.
I think it's hard. Um, but I know, I think like knowing that you've done like the best, you've given the most that you can, but also being able to like, I had a conversation this morning about like feeling that you can receive.
Mhm.
We give practitioners and like naturopaths, for example, give a lot. So
Mhm.
can you receive in return? Can you receive that positive feedback that like, I don't know, pat on the back that you did a good job, like feeling settled in that?
Yeah.
That's really huge.
Oh, I agree with you. And even right down to like that element of self-care for a healthcare practitioner. Like how many NDs go see another ND or go see like, an osteopath or a
Yeah.
therapist or somebody, some other healthcare professional on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's many.
No, 100%.
No.
And
Yeah.
like until I, started getting into my own benefits, like that wasn't something that I actively did. And like I'm so grateful for that, having that ability to do that now.
Yeah.
And again, that's the whole benefits conversation, right? It's like a mental thing. It's crazy. Um, but yeah, like I think that's important. Self care for yourself, whatever that looks like. I
Mhm.
think a lot of it is like in how we're, you know, work working mentally, emotionally.
Yeah.
That's where I think a lot of our stress lies, right? Especially
Yeah.
in the beginning of becoming a practitioner. You're
Oh,
green,
it's
like you're learning new, like, right?
yeah, there's so much pressure. So much pressure.
And
And it's
like that,
scary.
yeah, that's why I was so um adamant on finding mentorship to be like, okay, so that I could like reflect, is this the way that I want to do it? I think over my many years, I've like created my own sauce and to be like, this is how I like to do it.
Mhm.
But that's just, I can never just teach that. That's just like years of me like pulling this in and like, this didn't work. And like, and
Mhm.
it still refines
Yeah.
every day.
Oh yeah, it constantly changes. It's like I think we forget sometimes that it's called practice for a reason.
Hmm.
Like it because it is like you can definitively 100% know that like this treatment plan works, but like that does not mean, just what we were talking about earlier, that it will work exactly that way for the next person that comes in with like that same condition,
Hmm.
right? It's constantly trial and error.
Even Cellcore, right?
Yeah.
That's why I say it's not linear. Like for one client, it's like this immediate great response. And for someone else, it's not that.
Mhm.
So I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
That's why there is no cookie cutter anything.
No, definitely not. And I find too, like being a practitioner has been like a huge opportunity for me to work on myself as well, like even as a business owner, right? That all your shadow sides are going to come out in full force, like every like patient interaction, like every business anything, like trying to get yourself out there to be seen, to help grow your business, all that type of stuff. It's like it's such a huge learning curve.
Yeah. Oh, I'm like amazed by the people that are like yourself that can just so confidently like push record and like I'm just so in awe of that, because that's something that I have a hard time with.
Yeah, and we talk about that a fair bit. And let's talk about human design for a second here. I think this is a great opportunity for us to like segue into a little human design chat, because you were also the person who introduced me to human design.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating approach to understanding oneself, of like how we show up on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, I don't know, but what do you want to say about human design?
I mean, I totally like, I'm just, again, like enamored, fascinated by it. They just provided me so many like, oh yeah, that's like kind of why I really like that. And like, you're over here and this is kind of how you operate. It just made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything has ever made sense to me in, that realm.
Yeah.
Like I'm a generator in human design, which is, do the things that light you up 100%, not 80%, not 70%, which also is a hard concept. I'm like, I don't know, like what lights me up. So figuring out what doesn't light me up is like the key for me to understanding more of that. But then like the nuances with that, in that like you're an emotional, a non-emotional, and specific versus non-specific manifest, like just, I don't know, it's so fascinating. And I feel like it really helps just kind of give you guideposts to figuring things out for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would agree with that too. Cause are you a sacral?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cause like that whole body, like that body awareness, like yes or no type of sensation. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when someone
cool.
like, you have a really hard time answering open-ended questions. I totally do. Like ask me yes or no questions. I can tell you.
Yeah.
Right? It's like very generator sacral energy, where it's like, do you want salmon or chicken for dinner? Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Versus like, what's your most favorite food in the world? That's like a very scary question for me, because it's too open-ended, and like, I was like, that makes sense. And then the 1-3 being like that, that researcher, like that deep knowledge seeker.
Mm-hmm.
It's so true. It's almost like you never get enough. And you never land in this exact thing.
Yeah.
And having that open head also is like this.
You have a very open chart.
So
also.
Open.
Yeah.
For a generator, my chart is very open. It's like almost like a projector chart.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So for those who are listening who don't understand much about human design, having an open chart would mean that your centers are white, like they're not filled in. So those are areas in your chart where you would be absorbing wisdom from the outside world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like you're like a energetic sponge, if you will.
Yeah. Which can be difficult, because sometimes it's hard to know what's yours and what's not yours when that's there. I also have found human design really helpful in like navigating like friendships and relationships, and like just understanding people better that are like close to me.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like that makes sense. This is why that occurs this way for them, or they operate this way. And I kind of like that, because it just like creates less conflict, because you're like, oh yeah, let's just their thing.
Yeah, it is. It's more of an appreciation / understanding of someone, and bringing curiosity to why someone does things the way that they do, versus judgment, I suppose.
And like helping them flourish in the ways that I think are their strengths. Like my partner is a manifesting generator, and if before this I would have been like, he's just so unfocused, like he's like literally like new thing, but that's like, that is like the thing of a manifesting generator, to be just so interested in so many things. And it almost feels like you're a little bit like squirrely, because it's like this thing, right? Thank you, next, Ariana Grande, right?
Yeah.
But that is like the thing that like helps them drive energy. And so like I just started like, encouraging that, because I'm like, that's actually not the thing that you want to push down. It's the thing that helps you be more you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
I've really liked it from those, even like the digestion part of the chart. I don't know like what you are, but I'm like a quiet digester, even of like information. So like it needs to be quiet. Like, when some people need music on to focus, like I want it to be quiet.
Yeah, I think my is buzzing.
Oh, so you need
I'm
now.
like bird food, buzzing atmosphere. I gotta like I'm best when I'm like eating while I'm running out the door type of person. That actually works better for me. And it's so funny because I am that person. So it's like, it's just funny sometimes when I'm like, your parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest.
Yeah.
You need to be in this rested state in order to optimize digestion. And telling people about that whole pathway versus like my human design chart is like, no, you actually do better when you're running around.
Yeah, like I mean, like I like peppering that in if people are open to it. Like, not that I'm not an expert by any means, but it's like interesting. I'll have them just kind of like, hey, check this out. Like, what do you think of that? And they'll
Yeah.
get their own interpretation of that on, or work with someone. I think it just gives you some understanding, and I really like it, and further like helps us to like not make anything cookie cutter.
Yeah. Agreed. Like even right down to, I mean, nothing is gospel, if you will. Like just because human design says that, like,
Exactly.
I apparently prefer like a buzzing environment to eat doesn't mean that like I have to only eat in a buzzing environment, right? It's like taking the information that you're willing to like work with or experiment with, and then kind of leaving the rest, and then coming back and taking that information or learning from it, and kind of like shifting your perspective of the situation, reapplying it in some way, if you will.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
know what sun is? The personality
Say that
learning?
again.
The sun?
The sun, what my
The
personality.
personality part of the chart.
Yeah, that's in the upper right corner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think mine's 45. So it's like leadership, like rulership, leadership type stuff.
That makes sense for you. I just
Yeah.
like, take it on, girl. Take it on. Mine is something about like being able to identify when something's not working and like correcting it.
Yeah.
Which is a challenging one because you can't lead with that.
Yeah, that one's a little tricky to lead with because it's like someone has to bring you something.
Well, it also feels like a lot of criticism if it's like, well, that's not working. So
I feel like though that works for you in terms of like being a naturopathic doctor.
it does, because I'm like, nope, there's the area, right? Or like
Yeah.
several areas. So it is helpful.
Yeah.
It's a helpful thing.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. I found mine was like, oh, yeah, it's like there's so many elements in my chart of like, you like wanting to be the ruler of your own land, and like then like showing people like how to utilize their resources, but like you're not the one showing them, you have to tell someone else how to show them. It's like it's very like old school like like king and queen type of mentality of that like hierarchy
Yeah.
personality or like life path thing. And I've actually found it to be a little challenging to be like, well, how do I apply this in 2021 where, I can still be the ruler of my own plot of land while like still playing with others. Cause like, yeah, my resume, I would definitely say on it, does not play well with others. Put her in her own separate room and let her call all the shots.
Yeah. You just need to find like the right fit people that are like, yeah, cool, you do that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is difficult, right? It's like I find, and we touch on this sometimes too, which maybe we'll talk about it at another time because our time is running out here. About like childhood conditioning and bringing that into adult life. and like, what does that look like? And so for me, I have a lot of sensitivities around not playing well with others, or, being bossy, like those types of things where it's like, I always needed to be the one in charge. So it's like learning to like work through that stuff now as a 34-year-old person, like just understanding that, like, that could be used for good, like if you're willing to see it that way and work with it.
And like as a kid, I was always the observer, and I still continue to be the observer. Like, let me just stand back for a second, check out, like feel this environment, and then like there's a video of me from a birthday party with my cousins who were like, they grew up in like they had a lot of siblings, so it was like, big family, and they're like, a birthday cake comes out and they're just in it, like all eating it, like and I'm standing back like
like watching the whole situation.
Yeah. And then like, eventually I kind of go over there and grab like, I don't know, whatever, like a strawberry off the cake, and that's so me, me. So I don't know how that all applies in, but like, just, I don't know. It's interesting to see that play out in like your adult life.
Yeah. I think from like the childhood conditioning sensitivities, like those experiences that really stand out to us, as perhaps maybe being viewed as something that was a deficiency, if you will, reframing it that's actually there's something in that experience that is actually a superpower.
Your strength.
Yeah, there's something that's a true strength in that, and it's learning to like understand what that is. Yeah,
no, totally. And that is like kind of coming back to the human design, why I like it, because I think it allows you to like play more into your strengths and not be apologetic for that. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I continue to be fascinated, and I'll go like deep into it and then come back out for a little bit and like not touch it for a while, and then I'll be sparked to like look at it again. And
yeah, totally play around with like the different, like even like going into birth charting for a little bit, or well,
you
I
have
get
to, like,
that.
Versus like, I think as an ND, like I am so into the knowledge and like the research portion of it that like you do need to come up for air and like put that into practice, really like cultivate that, and then go back down in.
Yeah,
to gather.
Experiment with it, not constantly be like caught into like reading the theory of it all, but actually applying it to real life and seeing how it works for you.
Because then you're not living it.
Yeah. And I think that all goes back to like, I think what a big conclusion of overarching theme of this conversation was that, it is all a practice. All of it, everything is like, clinical practice, helping with like physical health issues with others, and then also like in terms of understanding yourself in life and how you live your life. And it's like you have nothing to lose by just experimenting with things and trying to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And along the way, that can get a little messy sometimes, but I mean, it's totally worth it.
It's all working, it's all gathering, it's all like a level of curiosity that I think is important for you to ultimately discover like what's the best thing that's going to work for you.
Yeah, agreed.
Sweet.
On that note, is there any last words of wisdom, advice, anything off the top of your head?
I was thinking for a sec there, like of like us ending off with what our favorite, like, or what a book recommendation would be.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'll say like one of my favorite books was, or still is, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza. Such a good, it's I won't even say much about it, but it's a good read.
Yeah, that one is a good one. I really like that one too. I would say mine is, just because I just read it and it's like really stuck with me, I'm probably just going to read it again, is Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Fascinating. Yeah. Just really shifts and like puts some things into perspective of values and what we're here for and purpose and stuff. Yeah.
I'm going to have to get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so So we can make
Cool.
sure everyone to grab and read some of
Yeah,
our things.
exactly. Yeah. And then more book recommendations. I'm always down for more book recommendations if anybody has any. Anyways, thank you for this conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Super insightful. I'm glad we got to talk a little bit more about the Cellcore stuff because I know there's a fair bit of people who are quite
Yeah, I
interested.
mean, like, there is a lot to learn from it. I mean, I talk about it very like high level, but like, it's really cool.
Yeah,
So,
that was just like the tip of the ice, like not
like,
even the tip of the iceberg of like
yeah,
that world. But yeah,
Mhm.
perhaps another podcast.
100% Cellcore podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing.
All right, Emily. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Talk soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
And there you have it. Lots of insightful information. I'm sure if you are also a naturopathic doctor, you found that just as insightful as you would if you were a client and somebody who is on a healing journey themselves. If you guys would like to learn more about Dr. Emily Fitzgerald, I have linked more information about her and where you can follow along with her below. And if you would like to learn more about anything in this podcast episode, please reach out to me privately and I'd be happy to direct you to where the best sources of more information would be for you. As usual, please like this podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends, anyone who would find this information relevant and helpful. It means the world to us. Thank you so very much.